So you talk about that early Olympic dream. Like, how early are we talking?
I think as young as I can remember, like with all my family sitting and watching the TV and watching the Olympics. And when your whole family is watching something, I think subconsciously as a kid it tells you that that is success. So I think it probably put a subconscious seed in my mind that if I could achieve something like that, I'd be successful, at least in my own measure.
And was diving something that you actively watched? Because it's certainly not the first sport that comes to mind for me, like as an outsider. Usually for Aussies, you think swimming. You know, I think a lot of people think track because of how much attention track gets.
Yeah.
But diving's quite niche, right?
Yeah, I was doing gymnastics and trampolining at the time, and a fair bit of soccer. I love soccer. Soccer's so fun. If I could have gone to the Olympics for soccer, I probably would have. That is so cool. And you got a team. I miss being part of a team. So having diving as an individual sport can be tough. But there was a girl I liked that was diving, and that's why I started diving. And then the gymnastics and tramp helped. But I remember the pool was cold. It was windy. I honestly did not want to go at all. But she was there, so I would go. And eventually I got a little bit better. I wasn't very talented. I was actually probably one of the worst divers you'd see in the pool. I was really bad.
It's so interesting, mate. Like, you know, you see all those memes on social, men are simple creatures. It's like just seriously, the attraction for
good motivation.
Diving.
Good motivation.
It's brilliant. And so how old were you when you started?
Like 12, 13.
Yeah,
Quite young. So I've been doing it for over 10 years.
Is that, like, it's interesting. You say quite young, right? But I guess by the standard of a lot of sports, it's probably old. Like you say soccer.
Yeah.
Most people who go to the Olympics for soccer were probably playing soccer when they were 5 or 6 in the backyard.
Certainly.
A team.
In fact, when I came into the institute, I was really far behind. Kids had been there for a lot longer than me. My technique was honestly the worst in the institute. Like, it was so bad that I was worried they wouldn't even take me. I was tall. They thought I'd get too tall. I wouldn't be able to do certain dives. So it's not something that I fell into and just kicked into gear and started to succeed at. It's something that I fell into because of a girl and then had to go through a fair bit of adversity and pushbacks to get there. But I had a coach when I was young called Vaninka, and she believed in me and just believed in me enough that I believed in myself that I could make it. Sometimes all it takes is just one person. I had the support of my family as well, but yeah, I came in late, very far behind.
It's interesting you say that. You talk about your coach there, Vanika. That's how I say her name?
Vaninka, yeah.
And
the only person I've ever met with that name, by the way.
Oh, for
a
sure.
Good name.
For sure. It's not hard. It's hard to forget, right?
Yeah, it's good to remember.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that she believed in you. She obviously seen something in you. Has she ever said to you what it was in particular that she found easy to believe in you for?
She's always been supportive throughout my career, even as she moved on from being my coach. But I think she said she's seen a drive in me, just that will to win, like that fire we were talking about. I couldn't pinpoint where it comes from. But every day, I always think, how can I do better? How can I be more effective? And sometimes it's not about just sheer head down, gritting it out. Sometimes it takes stepping back and thinking about it. There's a saying I like, which is first with the head, then with the heart. Hard work alone, I think, won't get you there. You got to think as well. And diving, being such a mental sport, it requires hard work, but then also the ability to step back and analyze and think about how you can do things differently if it's not working.
Mate, it's really interesting. I'm often intrigued by people who are in your position because you go through, much as I did, I loved anything athletic as a kid. Like anything where there was a bit of competition and...
Were you able to do many sports having the lung challenges?
I was so active, and it's probably the thing that saved me.
Really?
Like, it's the reason I'm so healthy now. Gave me such a great foundation of health. Well, mate, my dream growing up, until I was like 9 or 10 because of my liver disease, was to be the next Brad Fittler. Like, that's what I wanted to do in my life. I was a massive rugby league fan, lived and breathed the sports, all I thought about. Like, my mates used to call me footy at school.
You loved it?
Because it's all I cared about. But then with liver disease, I couldn't take large impact to the body because my liver and my spleen are exposed beneath my rib cage, so they're at risk of being ruptured.
Why is that? Is that... How are they
essentially
exposed?
They're under so much, they call it like hypertension of the liver, where essentially it's under so much pressure, and because of the scar tissue and some of the blockages in there stop blood from moving through, so it tends to fill up and get a little bit bigger throughout that process. And so I've had an enlarged liver and spleen from the age of 9, so it got to the point where it became more risk than there was reward for me to keep playing a contact sport, which devastated me at the time, but I was blessed that I had other things I was interested in that I could sort of put my attention to those things.
That's where the diversifying I was talking about just comes into play.
For sure. But here's what I find interesting, right? So when I was that age, you could just pursue anything that you really wanted to without consequence, right? And then you turn 18 or you sort of get into your early adulthood, and there starts to become consequence for the choices you make, because, you know, if you're going to pursue something like diving, you're not going to make millions unless you're the Olympic champion, unless you've got a number of endorsement deals attached to it. So you start to have to think about, okay, what kind of life do I want to lead? And is this something I'm willing to risk it for? Did you have that kind of point in your career in which you were like, this is very real now, and I need to be very dedicated to this because it's going to change the trajectory of my life one way or the other?
It's a good point, because as a kid, there's nearly no consequences. You can go training, you know, you can fit it around your school. It fits into life really well. Whether you win or lose doesn't particularly matter too much. But to me, it did, actually. Like, I was just so driven to do whatever it took to make it in the diving. But there are less consequences when you're young, and as you get older and you start to have more responsibilities, you do think about how that fits into everything else that you do. Diving, I've been able to diversify and find ways to capitalize on the sport that most people haven't been able to do before through social media. So I've been able to really build things outside diving to support it. So it puts me in a position where diving may financially make me nothing at all, but I have other skills that can utilize the diving to make an income and do different things and expand into other areas like podcasting or doing some TV stuff as well.
Do you find that you're very driven? Like, I don't know whether this comes from your sport or not, but your sport is quite technical in the way that you have to probably watch back everything that you do to see where those technical errors or faults are or where you got things right. Has that transferred to everything you do online?
I think diving taught me the skills to succeed that I use everywhere else in life.
Can you identify them?
Yeah, even things like, say, persistence. Say I'm learning a dive and it takes me a year to learn. I eventually do it, and that's scary for another year. And then after that, it's still inconsistent, and you've got to keep working at it just to get that dive to a point where it's consistent in competition so you can do it when you need to. So understanding, all right, I'm doing this thing now, but it's going to take me 3-4 years to perfect. And then you have a time frame when you look at something like socials and something doesn't work for a week, a month, 2 months, 3 months, even 6 months, just to have that diligence to be like, even if this sucks for a period of time, eventually I will figure it out.
Yeah.
So persistence is a big one.
Isn't it? It's such a great skill. And I think that, you know, one of my favorite quotes, Barry Hearn, the boxing promoter, I say boxing promoter, like just great sports promoter in general. He always had this great quote that I wasn't the brightest candle in the room, but I always burnt the longest. And I think that if you look at anybody's success long term, like anyone who's held consistent long term success in their field, the key ingredient that you see in each and every one of those characters is just consistency and persistence.
Couldn't agree more. Like, I was not the best diver ever. There were many divers that were better than me that didn't make the Olympics because they just retired or they quit or they gave up beforehand. Even with social stuff, there's content creators that had better edits, more sophisticated, but you just out persist nearly everything. And I always feel like that prevails. I think if you are persistent and willing to change, like Tony Robbins talks about, people say, oh, I've tried everything and it didn't work. And normally you've tried, or I know from my experience, I've tried 1 or 2 things 4 or 5 times. But I always try to remind myself, had I tried everything, it would work because I would have found what works. I think even just knowing, I've learnt this from my diving, no matter how impossible it looks, if you just keep trying different things, then eventually you'll figure it out, even by complete accident. But
do you ever think about that now? Like, you've got a bit of a personality online. You know, obviously, like you said, you can't dive forever, right?
Yeah.
Maybe got a few more years left in you diving.
Hopefully, I'll see if this back prevails. I got this
Yeah.
injection today. They said that it should help, but even with the back issues, because it's quite a severe thing. It's my spine, and they were doing a spinal injection this morning. And I said to the radiologist, like, do you think if I keep diving, I'm going to destroy my back forever? Because if you say yes, I'll stop. And they say they're not sure, but to get the injection and see how it goes. But you do get to a point where you're like, I've achieved nearly everything I want in diving. I want to keep diving. But at this point in my life, if that cost is destroying my back, it's not worth it.
Can I ask you, feeling that kind of uncertainty about your future, does it affect your ability to perform?
What it does is it adds a layer of complexity, but it doesn't, because you just stick to your job. My job's to show up, my job's to train, and I do that. Yeah. And I just do that. And it's been so tough training injured, because what it is, it's like a sharp pain that shoots down your leg. And it's not like a hard pain of, like I've broken bones and it's like a harder pain, but it's like, because it hits your nerve, it's sharp. So it's not something you can push through, but I've been able to stay fit, stay in shape. And for example, just doing bench press, like it hurts just to lay down. Once I get in that position, it's okay and I can do the exercise. And you train like that, or you try to do what you can for months, and all in the back of your head, you're like, should I really be doing this? Should I be stopping? But then on the other side, I'm thinking, if I just leave it, could it get worse because I'm not doing my proper recovery? So it puts you in a tricky spot, and then you've just got to try and narrow it down to, okay, right now, I got to do my rehab, and that's what I got to do to get me through today, and just kind of break it down that way.